This is the fourth video in this series that is going to demonstrate how to create a complete post for this CNC project. In our case, we're creating a sign. And in the previous three videos, you learned how to create the setup. You learned how to input the machine and tool list. And in the last video, you learned how to create the three operations that we have here now, which is an engrave, a trace, and a contour. This video is going to focus on the simulation aspect, and in my opinion, it is one of the most useful and important functions of the CAM process to make sure that we minimize any problems or errors uh, in the process, but also to not just minimize them, but to find them and fix them before we get to the machine and create more waste and waste our time. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the simulation. Now there's two ways that you can simulate these operations. You can do one by right clicking each of these and selecting simulate. The option that I like better when I feel I have my three operations, or when I feel like all my operations are pretty good as is go to the setup itself and create the simulation there. Now, when I start the simulation, you'll notice that the CNC cave, my design, essentially, my sign design, is visible. Now, this is because the model is on right now. If I turn the model off, it's gone. And I actually highly recommend and personally prefer this because I want to see what it's going to look like in real life as my CNC machine is milling this piece of wood. I don't want to see my model, which I'm already confident is good and it's the way it's supposed to be. So I highly recommend you turn the model off. And it is also important to have the right thing selected here. So let's look at the menu under simulate. The first option we have, so there's three tabs. The first one has tool. I think it's important we have the tool, otherwise you just have that dot. But sometimes if you have the full holder here, it can be kind of challenging. Like it can be difficult to see. I'm not sure why it's showing at this point, probably because I haven't input the holder, but I like to just see either the flute or the shaft. I just want to see the tool. The second one is toolpath. I can choose to show the toolpath, but it can muddy the water really quick. So I like leaving that off. The stock is really important. So this represents our piece of wood that we programmed in at the setup. Now, ideally, this is the same size piece of wood that I'm going to be putting in my machine. And you can play with some of these options here, but I like to just leave the tool. And for material, I prefer the ceramic, but you could really use any of these. It kind of just changes the color. The ceramic is a nice tan color. It approaches wood somewhat. You can kind of always read over the options here. I'm going to view the model, even though it's turned off. Now, if you go over to info, here's some really important information. One, you can always read the X, Y, and Z positions on the machine and see the spindle speed. This is what it's going to be telling your machine to do. You can see the engrave, and probably the most important one is the time. So you can get a projection of how long each of these operations is going to take. And in statistics, you can see how far you've cut, and again, the machining time. And I believe this machining time is for the entire process, not just a single operation like it shows you here. Down at the bottom, we see kind of like a video bar, because essentially that's what the simulation is a video bar. So if you hit play, it's going to start machining. And now the speed you can control with this slider here. If you go to the left, it's going to slow down. You go to the right, it's going to speed up, and you can get it going really fast. But I think it's really important to make sure that it's machining the way you want, the depth you want, the features you want. So I like to leave it, especially the first time I'm watching this, when I'm trying to figure out if there's any issues. I like to keep it at a reasonable speed. So I can see here it's ramping down as I told it to do. The depth of cut looks pretty good. If it was going too deep, this is where it would show that it might have one pass instead of three, which I need for my machine because I don't want to cut 3/4 of an inch all at once. My machine is not rigid enough for that, but maybe yours is. So here's where you watch and see what it does. And just like everything else in CAD, I can move this around. I can look straight down on it. I can look at an angle. It just depends what features you're trying to see. If this were going around a whole bunch of times, this might be a good time to speed it up. I'm going to look for tabs, and there they are. So it is creating the tabs, and this makes sure that this side doesn't come free during the machining operation, which always ends up in gashing pieces of it. Right now, I'm kind of taking a look at the first two machining operations, and it looks like that is all working relatively well. I have a consistent depth. It looks like what I programmed in. If there were any issues with that, this is the time to go fix it, come back, simulate it again, and see what it's doing. Now, you can see with some of these bars, I can play it again here. This machine, or some of these options allow me just to go to the next operation. That can be useful. Go to the end of the toolpath. If you want to, check out the very end of your video. But simulating is extremely important. I almost wish I had some errors here so that I could better demonstrate why it's so important to catch them now. But I'll tell you, one of the more common errors sometimes is that the lead in, which we see right here, sometimes this is on the area that you want to keep. It's not on your waste area, but it's on your keep side. Well, that's something that you can identify here so that you don't waste a piece of wood. A lot of times there are depth challenges when it comes to the engraving, whether it's it didn't go through enough or it went through too much and you're cutting way more into your spoil board than you need to be. Those are definitely things that you should be looking for when it comes to your simulation process. And again, this is why it's so helpful. We're talking about different depths, that the piece of wood that you're going to be cutting on is the same size that you have entered into your setup. So you can check all those different things and make sure that you're not going to have any depth challenges, issues, problems, or anything like that. Also, sometimes when we are doing milling, you'll see that something you projected to have a sharper corner doesn't. Well, a lot of times that can be because of the diameter of the bit that you're using. So it can be a tool selection issue. Maybe you need to change the tool in the program. But those are all things that you can play with and find the correct solution before you go to the CNC and you start wasting wood and start wasting time and hopefully not wasting tools, but that absolutely does happen as well. So at this point, I'm happy with my simulation. I can double check and just see how long this is going to take. It's a pretty short cut, only about 7 minutes or so. And once I'm happy with that, I can exit the simulation and now make sure you turn your model back on. And at this point, I'm ready to go to the next step, which is going to be create my CNC post, and that will be in the subsequent video.